Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Gifted, as well as the latest episode of The Flash. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of The Gifted, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The Flash. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Gifted. Quite a few interesting things went down in this episode. So first of all, let's kind of focus on, the Lauren situation. Because it's interesting, because even though Lauren she doesn't even know what Andy's really up to, or even, what the Frost sisters are up to. But when she's dreaming, she feels like Andy's trying to probe into her brain. I guess it's kind of the side effect of kind of like her and Andy have that connection. So any outside source kind of like feels a little weird. Especially because they're kind of like acting through Andy, so I guess like it just makes everything a little weird. So she feels like something's off. So she just has been trying to stay up the entire time, waking herself up almost like every 20 minutes, which is like just so she doesn't dream. Maybe it's something that it took a while to kind of calibrate, but eventually the Frost sisters were able to kind of, fully control it without there being an issue. It might even just be the fact of the matter is for Lauren as well. It's just the fact of the matter is because she was fighting her sleep, it probably made it harder and harder. But the moment she kind of like sank into the sleep, it just probably made it a little easier for them. But this all stems from, because, she's trying to deal with everything in the sense of like her connection to Andy and the Fenris ability. She's playing the music box and Reed's like, don't do that. I wouldn't do that, because he ends up telling her the story about, the boy who could hear a voice but his dad didn't listen, and then by the time they got back home the boy had died. It's basically like, and it's so interesting because I was wondering about what it was, because it's like that story is basically, and he had told his story before. It's the same story, kind of similar to what he had told Caitlin before, I believe. I think that's kind of the same story. But the fact of the matter is, the music box is like a music telling of that story. And so for him, it's like his dad warned him about the darkness. It isn't just in Lauren and Andy. We've seen it in Reed too, because he's dealt with it when he was younger too, and that's something that ends up happening when he ends up talking to Lauren, because basically she's kind of losing herself more and more because she's getting drawn into it, because the power of Fenris is so seductive. She knows it's bad, but she feels like there's something inside of her that's like, we could do so much good with it. I feel like I can make every wrong in the world right again. But it's just the power seducing her into believing that power, I don't know, maybe there's a possibility for that power to do more than destroy, but currently in its state all it can do is destroy. But it's enough to, kind of draw her in. And I guess at the end of the day, that's what that music box is meant to. I guess it's meant to, like, tap into the darkness. Like, maybe on some, like, it hits a frequency that resonates with their DNA or something like that. Because it seems like it's something specific about them. So it's like, it must resonate with them in some shape or form, because it's like, I mean, to be fair, it hasn't really played around other people, so maybe it'll have similar effects on other mutants, but at the very least, it seems like it resonates specifically with their family. I mean, at the very least, Lauren and Reed at the very least, so that in itself is a very interesting aspect, to the point, like, she kind of gives into her darker ambitions, because she sees like a group, a family of mutants kind of being hassled by the cops. She kind of snaps and attacks the police car, just because it's kind of like lowering her inhibitions to kind of go, do whatever I want. I have this power. I might as well use it. I want to get stronger. It's kind of interesting. Once again, I bring up the parallels of like her human mom is telling her to use her powers more and, get stronger, and isn't that worried about it, because she's so caught up in her own situation that she's not willing to kind of recognize what's going on with Lauren. And then you have her dad, the mutant, trying to tell her not to kind of give into it and stuff like that. It's just kind of interesting how those aspects are kind of opposite with each other. You'd probably, in this situation, you probably assume the human parent would be like, no, and then the mutant parent would be like, yes, it did this. It's just interesting, because at least that's how the parallels work in my head. So it's just kind of interesting to kind of see it kind of be flipped in their regard. But Reed finally talked to her about it, being like, I completely understand. Because for Lauren, that's because of her connection to Andy and their connection to this Fenris situation. She feels like no one else can understand her except for like Andrea and Andreas. They were the only ones in a very similar situation until Reed revealed to her that he's been feeling the same thing too, to the point, like, obviously, because we got a flashback showing that Reed kind of gave into his darkest inhibitions, that he would attack people. He was even beating a kid up at one point in time, and he liked it. And he even goes as far as being like, my dad wasn't trying to tell me that story to warn me away from the darkness. He already knew I'd embraced it and that I liked it. That was the whole reason why he took Reed's powers from him in the first place, tried to like bury his mutant abilities, because he already saw it already kind of swarming inside of Reed, the darkness, and he knew that with his abilities, at the very least, if his abilities were shut down, then it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It makes you wonder, is that another reason why his powers came back? Is because of the DNA, like what runs through their blood is so strong that it fought? I mean, would that apply to every mutant, or is it specifically just in the Von Strucker family that, you know, what's in their DNA is just that powerful? Because Reed took that aspect and he's applying it to Lauren, because Lauren's like, I can't fight it that much longer. But so he gives her part of the serum. Like, I'm sure, like, I mean, granted, they have a limited supply, so it's going doubly for people. I'm assuming, like, from this point on, like, it didn't look like she had the full shot, but maybe she did. But I'm assuming he's giving her half and he's taking the other half himself. So it's interesting. Like, this is all about saving his life, but this is also about saving Lawrence to make sure that she doesn't get, you know, tempted. Which I believe is the title of this episode, which kind of is very befitting and everything. So at the very least, it seems like it is able to help Lauren to a certain extent. It probably won't last forever. It'll probably, you know, be very temporary. But it's interesting. It makes me wonder, like, many different things. One, would it work a little longer on Lauren because she hasn't built up an immunity to it? Like, maybe in Reed's particular case, it's like, you know, he was dealing with a very similar situation most of his life, having like his X gene kind of shut down. So it's like maybe Lauren's resistance isn't as high as this, so it might work a little bit longer, or maybe it is just going to work just as long, just because their powers are kind of like that, the DNA is just that strong. And the other thing is, it seems like that kind of plays into what I was thinking, because it's like, well, because whatever it is in their genes, like in their DNA, it's specifically in the X gene in their family, because the moment the X gene gets shut down, everything else associated with the lust for power and everything kind of gets shut down too, to the point even Andy's connection to her disappears, and he's like, I don't know, things feel strange, I can't feel her anymore. So that's definitely going to be interesting. I'm interested to see what Caitlin has to say about this. Like, when Reed kind of tells her about what went down and stuff like that, will she back down a little bit, or is she still going to go as full speed ahead like she has been up to this point? It's going to be very interesting to see what her reaction is to all of this. What's also interesting is that we kind of learned a little bit more about Erg in this episode too. Finally understand why he had, I mean, we learned a little last episode, but now we kind of got more context to why Erg is so anti-humans, because it turns out the human that ended up betraying the mutants wasn't just any human. Like, if it was just some regular human that betrayed them, then it probably wouldn't have been as bad, but it was someone he loved and cared about. He was already warned not to kind of get so close to a human and trust a human, but in the end it was like, maybe that's another reason why he did what he did, because not just cut himself off away from humans, but even go, because maybe he felt like ashamed, because he felt like it was all his fault, because he trusted the wrong person. And it's like, that's kind of like, it kind of makes sense, because it would take, kind of heartbreak to kind of make you that distrustful and just not really liking humans to that extent. But now, like I said, now we see it was a very personal cut for him in that regard. So granted, we don't know where she stands in the grand scheme of things, because she got arrested by Sentinel Service. But like, for her, it was like, no, like, I want us to start over. Like, she's like saying that everything she did, she was apologizing, but she was like, it was for us to kind of give us a new start. So it's not like she was completely betraying Erg, because she loved him and just wanted, because at the very least, this would have prevented Erg from being caught up in everything. That's why she was kind of like, no, don't worry about Evangeline trying to track her down or whatever. Like, no, come with me, stay here, trying to make sure that it was all over beforehand, like before he might have got caught up in the middle of it. So, and now that all ends up tying into this episode when Glow ends up getting shot, and Clarice brings Marcos and Caitlyn in, because, you know, I'm sure looking at Caitlyn's just kind of like, no, can't have a human here, because the last human that was a part of this world and everything betrayed us. So obviously, but Caitlyn kind of sets the record straight for one, being like, well, I kind of understand all this because literally everyone in my family is a mutant, which is like, yeah, both her kids and her husband is a mutant. So it's kind of like she's just as much in this world too, because it's all about, you know, because in his mind it's like, oh, you'll betray us. I mean, even though she was in love with, you know, Erg, that lady still betrayed all the other mutants, but she never betrayed him. So there's that whole situation. But at the same time, it's like Caitlyn has no plans of doing that, because it's not just her family that's in this. Like, I think the Mutant Underground has become another family to her too. Like, everyone that's a part of this, Clarice, Marcos, John, have all become like family to her too. So she wouldn't betray them either. So, but I think this situation kind of made Erg, it might be the step towards kind of changing Erg's mind going forward about a lot of things, because they end up going to the clinic and he's like, oh, so mutants worked here. And she's like, no, it was ran by humans who treated both mutants and humans, treated everybody equally. And I think that kind of showed, you know, because he had this one particular bad experience with humans, and now he kind of holds that blanket statement of, I mean, other humans have done shitty stuff too over the course, like within the confines of the show, also out of the confines of the show, of like the stuff we haven't seen. You know, humans have done crappy stuff, but that doesn't mean you blanket everyone. But I guess it's just, you know, for him, it's like his trust was broken, his heart was broken, so obviously he's going to have reservations. So, but I did like the fact of the matter is he walked over to Caitlyn and wrote an M on her face, kind of giving her, making her kind of like an honorary Morlock, kind of showing that like, hey, you might not be a mutant, but you're one of us, you're kind of in this with us, you know, kind of showing that he does trust her. So I thought that was kind of a nice touch. It is kind of sad though when it's all said and done too, because you still see that Clarice is still struggling, because hugging Caitlyn and Marcos, and even them being like, no, what's up, John? You said hi. You know, it's because it's been a little while, but it's still kind of a fresh wound for both her and John. Both of them still kind of dealing with it. So it's like, this is choices she made. She's fighting for what she believes. It doesn't mean it's not going to hurt any less, you know? And so, because it's interesting, because John was trying to rally up all the other Mutant Underground people, but they're not willing to fight, because it turns out, wasn't just Evangeline that died in that explosion, or just random mutants. It was like, no, there were leaders in that were killed as well, potentially. Like I said, there might be a twist where we find out Evangeline, if not some of them, might have survived. I'd assume, because there were bodies pulled out and stuff like that, and the Mutant Underground probably made sure that Evangeline's body was one of them. But to be fair, you sprinkle a little DNA somewhere, it's an explosion, charged bodies, like, it's easy to kind of fake your death in that situation. So I'm interested to see if anything ends up coming about that or not. But, well, it's also like, it's sad, because, like, you know, for John, it's like the X-Men believed in this one thing, and we had to fight to keep that alive, because, you know, and they kind of put it in an interesting perspective about what this whole Reva and Ryan situation was about them keeping them divided. Like, you know, Reva wants to create a world completely, you know, keeping mutants, like, I guess, pull even those mutants that are kind of on the side of humans away, and make it, you know, kind of segregate, you know, both sides of just all mutants and all humans potentially. It's what it seems like. Because I was wondering why they do what they're doing, but I guess it's like they're trying to make these radical movements to completely create both sides. But it's like, in the end, you're still going to be these number one enemies, but I guess as long as they're on their opposite sides, they'll have full monopoly over everything. Reva will have full monopoly over the mutants, and Ryan full monopoly over the humans. I kind of threw that out for her before, but it still doesn't seem 100% logical to me, because it's like you're still going to be huge wars and people are still going to die in the end. But I mean, each one's got their own goal and intentions and plans in mind, so it's going to be interesting to kind of eventually kind of get inside their heads to find out, like, what it is exactly they are getting out of this, you know, aside from all that, like, what their goals are, you know? But also, like, none of the Mutant Underground wants to have anything to do with this, because it's like they don't really have a plan. John's just kind of like, we have to strike first, but it's not enough with everything that's happened. It's just, the Mutant Underground has just been on a losing side lately, and it's just getting worse and worse the more time passes. So, all while that's happening, you have Lorna continuing her undercover work, trying to get close to Max, even breaking into his room, it seems like they're planning to hit like a whole bunch of like government facilities, like headquarters to Sentinel services, like White House and stuff like that kind of make their big mark against humans. It makes you wonder, I mean, could that have something to do with Benedict Ryan or not? Could he be helping? I mean, to be fair, they've got like purifiers kind of all throughout government, different positions and stuff like that. Because let's not forget wasn't he a senator, the dude that Lorna killed last season in the plane? Well, one of the people who she killed in the plane. Wasn't he a purifier, or at the very least he was anti-mutant? I don't know if he was outright a purifier or not. So, but nevertheless, I was actually kind of scared for Lorna for a minute, just because like Max was super paranoid. It's like, I guess because of his time in jail, he's not all that. He's very particular and like noticing like, oh, I know exactly where I left everything and it's been disturbed and everything, so that kind of almost didn't work out for her. It's interesting too, because we also learned a little bit more about her powers. She can almost do a little bit of a hacking thing, not to like obviously the extent of other people. She's not like hack savvy, maybe like, Sage or anything, but it's enough that like kind of the simple stuff, like if there's enough of like a repeat, like someone putting in a password over and over again into a computer program, like she can use her powers to kind of mess with everything. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting that I never would have thought that your powers could be applied in such a manner. So that's just kind of an interesting little detail. Like, obviously it plays into this episode, but I'm curious, like, will there be any applications of it beyond this? But along with all that, we have, it's kind of interesting because I meant to talk about this earlier, but I'll talk about it now. It's like the whole Glow and Marco's situation, because obviously he was giving her blood and everything. And I kind of felt it last episode. I guess I should have, it was kind of there before too, but definitely it shines even more this episode is the fact they said she's into Marcos until she goes, oh, your girlfriend, you're trying to help her out and everything. It's like, I guess she'll always have your heart. At the very least, I'll always, I'll have 2 pints of your blood running through my veins and everything. But it's like, if he had never made up with Lorna, they weren't in the current circumstances they are, I wonder would he have ever, would anything have happened, or would his whole situation with Lorna, even on the opposite side, still have affected it? I think their kiss and them kind of rekindling things to a certain extent, that they're fighting together again, all for, everyone's future, but more specifically Dawn's. I think that kind of shifted everything in Marcos's head as well. So, but Marcos was planning on torturing Max, and I liked when Max tried to confront Lorna. She pulled a knife out to him. It's like, first of all, who you run your mouth to? Because it's like, I am royalty around here. My dad started the Inner Circle. He started all this before there was even all of this. So the fact of the matter is, don't step to me. And he's like, okay, whatever you say, your majesty. So, but I didn't expect things to play out the way they did in the episode, because like Marcos is planning on torturing him to get information. I was like, oh, that's probably gonna get ugly. But I was like, okay, like I thought, like, because the way Max's ability works, I was like, hey, it's not really gonna be that helpful in this situation, not unless he tries it. But maybe Marcos will get the upper hand in that regard. But then like the gun went off, I was like, oh crap! And we see inside the car, we see more shots and lights and stuff like that, and we see Max kind of slump over. I'm like, oh, is he? Yep, totally dead. Marcos ended up walking away with a bullet wound, which is ironic considering the fact is he helped out Glow with her bullet wound, and now he's got one too. Not less is going to lead to a situation of, oh man, to help. Well, Caitlyn's already stocked up after helping with Glow, so probably have enough to kind of make this happen. Not less we have a situation where Glow is like, okay, I'll help you. It's like literally, it's kind of funny how that kind of worked out, but I didn't see that coming. I was like, wow. I mean, I guess it works out to a certain extent. It's kind of sad because it's like, well, you were going to interrogate him to find out how to stop what was coming, but it's like you interfere with the plans heavily because now like Heather and Tico can't do what they're doing because they need Max's help for their powers to kind of work in tandem. It's like, so this sets Reva's plan back, at least to a certain extent, until they find someone else to replace it, not unless they try to get Lorna to step up with her abilities, or even getting Andy to step up. I mean, because obviously this is all parallel to like trying to get Lorna to join too, so that they wouldn't even have to, because I guess Max and his team, Max, Heather, and Tico were just kind of temporary until they got Fenris's ability, because with Fenris's ability, they can topple buildings like it's nothing, so... But at the very least, for now, the Mutant Underground has inadvertently bought itself more time in this regard. But it's definitely going to be interesting, especially because Max was making such a point. I'm curious, like, did he inform anyone else about, his suspicions of Lorna. I'm curious to see, maybe like the Frost sisters might look her direction. Esme's probably going to try and point them not in that direction, but also at the same time, Esme believes in all this, so she might try to protect Lorna, but she already kind of went as far as she could because she was like, I already gave her a warning about all of this kind of mind your own business. So, but the fact is that Marcos or whoever ends up attacking, they probably don't know exactly who killed Max. I mean, the fact of the matter is we see that the car is on fire and exploding, so it's kind of like, yeah, that probably covered things up a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, it's just going to be very interesting to see what happens, where this all takes us in the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Flash. A great episode. A lot of stuff went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, obviously we have Cicada getting even crazier with his hits, because it turns out the doctor has a connection with the police department, because she ends up giving him essentially a hit list, and he starts killing even more metas at a much rapid pace. And so in a scuffle, trying to save another meta, Nora gets hurt. He ends up breaking her back, essentially, which is crazy because, for one, it's interesting because Barry was in that, like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, my head is all over the place. I do apologize. Essentially, what I was trying to say is, like, to me, I feel like, obviously that's a shitty situation in anyone's case, but I feel like, especially for a speedster, that's got to be worse. Especially for Nora, because she's never been in that situation before, and the thought that not only will you maybe never run again, you may never even walk again is, terrifying. But it's interesting because I was just before I started recording, I remember, like, yeah, Barry was in that exact situation. Like, if I remember correctly, it was like season 2 after Zoom, like, brutally beat him down, if I'm remembering that correctly. So, because I remember, like, Barry was in a wheelchair for a while. But, yeah. So, but that moment of just, like, her voice breaking and, like, Barry and Iris, it hitting them that hard, it's like, it's one thing if you personally go through that stuff, but to see your child, no matter, and it's like, that makes that whole situation even more heartbreaking, and Barry's trying to keep it together on the surface, but he was boiling hot underneath, kind of being very short-tempered with a lot of people, even to the point Cecile's powers are kind of resonating, being like, yo, I feel that anger come off of you. It's like, you need to let go of that anger, because if you don't, you're going to get consumed by it. That's literally what's happening with Cicada. And man, oh man, did Barry, that's crazy, because we've never seen Barry go as hard as he did this episode when he was fighting Cicada. Like, yo, to the point, like, they were talking about, yo, the amount of energy he was gathering up is like, that's the amount of energy from like 3 lightning bolts. And then, like, the moment, like, it seemed like Cicada was about to punch, I don't know whether he entered flash time or would he just naturally moving that fast, got behind Cicada, punched him in the back. To the point he went over to him and it's like, I'm going to end this, and vibrating his hand, and it looks like, it wasn't even looking like how, when, Eobard does his whole, like, hand phasing thing that he stabs people through their chest. It didn't even look like that. Like, Barry's fist was balled up, and it looks like he was generating energy off his hand. It looked like he was doing something completely different, and it's like, what was that? What was that about to be? Holy crap. Barry's never done that before, so it's kind of like, holy crap, like, he is always getting faster and stronger, so it could just be the manifestation of that, like, but, I mean, obviously it was just driven by his anger, but I'm curious, like, is that something we'll see kind of pop up later on, or is that just a thing where, like, Barry will never go like that because it takes the right conditions of him being so pissed and pushing himself so hard to do something like that? But even Cicada could not keep up with that. That was pretty badass. And not even just that, Killer Frost killing it too, being like, I don't think we've been properly introduced. They call me Killer Frost. Let me show you why. Made a freaking ice dagger in her and Cicada going, I'm like, yo, look at her. That's so dope. That was so freaking sick, dude. I loved it. Even to the point, like, it's also interesting too because, like, the dagger's flying towards her and Caitlin's like, duck. So it's like 2 personalities. I guess they kind of like, I'm curious how that worked. I guess it's kind of like Caitlin could kind of sense it or whatever. And so, or I don't know. I'm curious how that works, because is she like another pair of eyes? Like, how did that whole thing work? But she ducks. And then later on freezes the, not freezes, but uses her powers to kind of stop the dagger midair. And that gave Barry the time he needed for his powers to kind of kick back in and stuff. I was like, dude. Even Killer Frost later on being like, yo, ain't no way, Cicada is going to be coming at us anytime soon, after the way Barry essentially kicked his ass. And even Sherlock being like, yo, the Killer Frost and Flash duo is pretty damn good. It's like, yo, that was so freaking dope. Now, that's a good teamwork. I feel like this is the first time we've ever really seen them like really kind of team up like that, which was pretty awesome. But that's just like one aspect to this whole thing, because obviously, like, there's also all the other metas they kind of had to gather up and everything. And it took Novark to be like, oh, he's the one that ended up speaking to everyone. It's actually kind of interesting, because we kind of actually learn about how he actually became a metahuman. He was actually trying to help someone at the time of the particle accelerator. He apparently worked at a zoo. He was actually a good guy. He even pulled a snake off a kid, but it happened at this time of the particle accelerator. So now it's like, what did I gain from it? I got a snake in my eye, and now I got a meta killer after me. He's kind of like, after that, no more looking after anyone but myself. But when the time came, he was telling everyone else, okay, go before me, as like Ralph was pulling people up. Also, I love Peekaboo being like, nah, I'm looking after me. It's like, you're literally up, you're chilling on a helicopter. You could have helped at any point in time, but just like, no, you do your thing, which is kind of sucky, but hey, whatever. But it almost freaked me out, because the moment, like, Killer Frost ducked from it, the dagger kept flying. I was like, no! I was like, because I felt like he was going to die this episode, the way everything was kind of set. I was like, oh man, that's going to suck. And the dagger's flying to him. I was like, is someone going to get to him in time? Ralph grabs him in time. I'm like, yeah! Go, Ralph! Yes! Good catch. Well, pull. But nevertheless, I was like, that was so close. Holy crap. So that was kind of good. But also I had, like, Movark kind of being a good guy in that regard, so I thought that was kind of neat, him looking out for other people. He tried to say like he only cared about everyone else, but he even gave this speech to be like, no, like, because he was the one that convinced everyone. It's like, I lost someone, like that big dude ended up dying. He ended up fighting, and because of him, I was able to get away. So it's like, hey, if you stay here, you will die, because there's no fighting this meta. I mean, there's no fighting Cicada, especially when he can take your powers like that. It's also interesting, too, because this is one of the few instances you've ever seen Barry fighting without his powers. And no matter what you say, Barry was kind of holding his own. I guess, like, even without his powers, he's been fighting bad guys long enough that he's, got some fight in him, that he was kind of handling his own. But, I mean, obviously, Cicada still has the upper hand, because he still got his kind of superhuman strength in his regard, and he's kind of pretty resilient and stuff like that. So, but still, that was crazy. I even love that Cecile's the one that kind of takes Jones down. It didn't click in my head until Jones revealed, like, oh no, like a metahuman tried to control me. Spencer tried to control me with her tech, and I was like, right. I was like, because I was like, why are you? I guess you're just one of those people who are mad at metas. Like, it's like, no, we've met this guy before. I completely forgot until that came in. It's like, right, Spencer, the girl who was making all the headlines, the one that like Nora was super into, because apparently she was not just into Spencer just of who she was, but also because of who she was. And it's like, holy crap, this never come back up too. I'm interested to see what that ends up happening, like what ends up happening with Nora's love life. I mean, the fact of the matter is she can't, I wonder, is that going to be a storyline too, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, like her meeting someone in the past, because she can't stay. So if she did meet someone in the past, it turned into a whole complicated thing. Because if she did, she can't be with anyone there, because she might mess up the timeline doing stuff like that. More than everything's kind of out of whack already. But nevertheless, but I had completely forgotten about that. So it's like, okay, we can understand. She had you do some pretty terrible stuff. But even Cecile was like, the fact of the matter is you gave into that anger and you did all these terrible things. Like, you were scared, and now he's even going as far as being like, oh, we need to take care of metahumans. It's like, for one, it wasn't even an actual metahuman that did that to you. It was a lady with meta tech. So it was like, it's not like, oh, she was a metahuman with her powers doing terrible things to you. It's like, no, that was a regular person doing something terrible to you, which is like, people in general have been kind of, metahuman or not, do terrible things. That's kind of just the balance of humans. There's some good, there's some bad. And it's just kind of sad that in your mind, because it is a situation of just, you were consumed by rage. It takes a personal incident to kind of spark that. It's literally the same thing with Cicada. It's literally the same thing happened to Barry. It took a personal event to kind of push you over the edge. In his case, it's like, oh, I was controlled to do some terrible stuff. So It's actually kind of interesting because they fought so hard to get him back on the right path, because it's like, oh, they cleared his name and everything about what he did, and now he went off and just did a terrible thing. So it's kind of like, is that, because the argument could be made, it's like, was that always a part of you, that darkness? Was it just Spencer controlling you, or was that secretly, I'm sure that's the case of it. Just, it took that event to kind of awaken the darkness in him, just like it did, Cicada. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of an interesting element to it, kind of tying that all together with Jones, Barry, and Cicada with that, that anger, Cicada and Barry both coming at it from like a father standpoint. And that is the thing, because I didn't realize that until Barry kind of brings it up later on, but Cicada is kind of like a father to Grace. It isn't just kind of like an uncle situation. It's like, no, like that she became like a daughter to him. So it's actually interesting because Barry's like, let's use that relationship. If we heal Grace, then maybe we can heal Cicada's heart and maybe he'll stop. Granted, who knows? Maybe it'll be enough to kind of pull him back, because Nora was able to pull him back from doing something he would have regretted or, doing. So maybe that will happen. But let's not forget the doctor's there to also push him to kind of do a lot of this stuff, because it's kind of interesting because it's like, yeah, it's not just Cicada filled with rage doing all this. It's a regular lady behind all this too, being like, oh, these metahumans have to be taken care of, So it's interesting. And I think that might create more and more of a divide potentially going forward. Maybe, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if they tackle that or not, or whether or not Jones and the Doctor are going to be the outliers in the situation, or will we see more human? I mean, to be fair, I guess you could make the argument, like, not necessarily evil to that extent, but we are seeing regular humans, obviously, with the whole humans with, regular humans with, meta tech and everything. But nevertheless, I also love an aspect about this is that Snow, God, I said Snow. I don't know why I said that. I guess because I was in my head, I was thinking Killer Frost, but I think I just took Caitlyn's last name and just, nevertheless, that Killer Frost kept messing up Caitlyn's research and stuff like that. But it turns out the reason why is because she was scared that if Caitlyn finishes this cure, maybe she'll get rid of her. But it took Ralph pointing out, because I guess at no point Caitlyn told her about this, because it's like, yeah, you were going the entire time, but it's like ever since losing her last season, Caitlyn's just kind of been going stir crazy and trying to do whatever it takes to get Frost back. So it's like she would never get rid of you. But the fact is that Frost was like, well, what if one day she decides to wake up and she's like, I don't want to be a meta anymore. I thought that was going to be like, I thought it was like, oh, she knows, so she's just worried about the future that Caitlyn might change her mind. But it's like, no, she didn't really know until Ralph said anything. But I do like that obviously Frost is helping out. For one, her blade that had the blood on it, she brought it back as a sample to help Caitlyn with her research with this curing and everything. But also, like, they no longer need that device. Their telepathy is a lot more, because it wasn't even really like that before, them talking to each other like that. It was over time it got like that, but now I feel like it's even stronger than what it was before, to the point Caitlyn was able to help her out like that. So we'll probably get a lot more like inside her head conversations like that, but I really like that, because even Caitlyn is like, I will always protect you, because like, as even Ralph was like, yeah, you're trying to protect her, but she's trying to protect you too, and it's like, they'll always kind of have each other's backs. I like that, because it's something I didn't even really think about either, because it's like, yeah, the cure is even more deadly for Killer Frost than it is any other metahuman, because her abilities are tied to her personality. So if her abilities go away, so does Killer Frost. So it's like, yeah, it's almost like death / non-existence for you. So it's like, it kind of gets you all existential to a certain degree, or not to a certain degree, a complete degree. So it's just kind of interesting to kind of think about that all together. I also love that Singh was kind of like saying this at the end, being like, man, it's almost like you could read his mind the way you were able to say that, he was about to escape. He's like, you always had good instincts, but still. And Cecile's like, yeah, ever since, I had the baby, I've been kind of more in touch with my emotions and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. Also, we had Sherlock going to Nora, asking her questions about like, oh, let me see the archive and stuff. It's like, oh, you can always take me to the future. And she's like, okay. He's like, oh, would it be possible to take a human into the Speed Force? I'm like, that's never come up before, has it? I mean, Barry's obviously run with people, but never anyone with the Speed Force. So it's like, would a human be able to survive that? Like, is a speedster speed the only thing that keeps them safe in the Speed Force? Like, would that break a human's mind or something like that? It makes you wonder. But then I like Iris coming in and being like, so why are you investigating Nora? He's like, well, I'm not investigating. It's like, and presses the recording. It turns out like what he was carrying was apparently was like a monocle or whatever. It's like, it was a recording device. And he's like, okay, a little bit. Because he's not letting onto anyone knowing exactly what he knows. But, Iris kind of going all protective mother. She's like, the fact of the matter is, she's like, I've done a lot of investigating, and there's been plenty of roads I went down, tracks I went down. This is one of those tracks you don't go down because there's nothing there. It's like, you're only saying that because you're being a very protective mother, so you're not willing to kind of have objectivity in this situation, because you're like, no, Nora's told us everything. She's been honest. She's a good girl. Leave it at that. Go down some other track. And Sherlock kind of leaves it at that. So that was kind of interesting, because it's like, yeah, don't want to piss off Mama West Allen, because that'll be a problem on its own. It's actually kind of interesting, because this episode too, I'm just thinking about it. The fact is, when Cecile was kind of like helping Barry with his anger and stuff like that would seem like a real like mother moment. Like, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like Barry and Cecile haven't really had a lot of like familial moments in that regard, of like her almost kind of stepping in like a mom. I mean, technically, in this manner of speaking, she is kind of like his mom now, which is kind of interesting. I just never thought about that till now, until they had that conversation, until she's kind of like honey, and it's like, oh, the way she's talking to him like that is like a mom. I mean, technically speaking, I guess you can make the argument, she's got like 4 kids. She's got, well, 5 now, because she's got her 2, she's got Iris, she's got Wally, she's got Barry, so, man. It's just one of those things. I guess because they are adults, I kind of don't really think of it like that. But it's like, yeah, those are just as much her kids as they are Joe's at this point in time. Especially knowing what she knows now, and it just being part of Team Flash and everything. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting and kind of sweet to kind of think about. So, but I did like what they did at the end, where Sherlock is like, okay, so who's the mastermind behind this? Because he looked at the book, and there's 2 different handwriting styles. There's Nora and then someone else. And you look on the reflection, he's like, but who is it? And the reflection of the screen show his face. I'm like, that's nice. I like that being a little bit of a thing. I like that you did that. So that's kind of a nice touch. So I'm interested to see what goes on, especially in that regard, because it's like, hey, Iris said no investigating Nora, but it seems like we're going to do it nevertheless. So, and then everything going on with Cicada, especially because it seems like Cicada, like we see he turns his page, essentially his hit list, and XS is there. And I'm curious how much of the conversation he heard when Barry was like, you're never going to hurt my daughter again or something. So I'm curious, because already XS was like, don't hurt my dad, please. And that's what stopped him before from hurting and killing Barry. So that might be what he's aiming for, because it's like XS might be his way to get to the Flash. Potentially, that might be what he's thinking. So we'll see in the long run. I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.